So let's start with the presentation from my colleagues Cecilia Bertozzi and João Bento. They will guide us through the typology of tools and highlight the resources that are available on the website.
Our presentation will focus on the tools of urban design governance. The project developed a typology of tools that include broad 9 types that are divided by categories. The first point to be made is that we distinguish the tools by whether they are informal or formal in nature. In other words, the informal tools are discretionary and therefore optional, drawing on the state's soft powers. On the formal tools are legally defined as required roles using the hard powers of the state. Within the informal tools, we can also distinguish them by quality delivery tools and quality cultural tools. The cultural tools seek to establish a positive decision-making environment to prioritize design quality, as the delivery tools steer decision-making processes in a more focused and directive manner. Although the focus of the project was in fact in the informal tools of urban design governance, the project also searched for financial tools that may incentivize high-quality environments, engaging directly with and enhance urban design outcomes and processes. Examples include research projects focused on aspects of the design process or understanding particular design problems, or audits of the state of the built environment in order to understand the quality of the design environment and the challenge it presents.
As an example, we bring here the Bienal Baukultur reports, which are official reports issued every 2 years on the status of planning and construction in Germany, and include specific sets of recommendations to all kinds of actors to achieve higher quality in the built environments.
The second type, information tools, act to disseminate knowledge about the nature of good or poor design practices and processes. Examples include detached and passive learning tools, such as practice guides and case study libraries or manuals, or hands-on and active training tools involving in the direct engagement of participants.
Across Europe, we have identified many organizations that publish practice guides and design manuals, including successful examples to inspire, challenge, and encourage decision makers. This is the Public Space Design Manual from the Prague Institute of Planning and Development, which sets out the principles and objectives for the design of public space in the city of Prague, but also contains the rules and recommendations for achieving them with specific attention to comfort, inclusions, and long-term efficiency, for example, and also describes procedures for the investments to be made. A different kind of example we can bring is Arki, which is a Finnish non-profit that collaborates with schools and art institutions to offer educational courses in architectural design for children and young people, alongside basic education. The purpose is to guide and encourage the students to understand, approach, and interact with the built environment and the design processes.
Moving on to the third type, persuasion tools actively make the case for particular design responses in a proactive manner. Instead of waiting for organizations and individuals to seek out knowledge, for example, in research or guidance, these tools take the knowledge to them physically or through the media, seeking to package key message in a manner that engage attention and persuades. Different examples may include awareness-raising initiatives, such as design award schemes or structured campaigns focused on changing perceptions and practices in key areas, or target influence through direct advocacy to shape policies and programs, and partnership working across key actor groups.
An interesting example is, for example, the European Prize for Urban Public Space, which is a biennial award that recognizes the best works transforming the public space in Europe, and specifically those improving the life of the local citizens. Also, the prize recognizes both the designer and the local authority responsible for the project, and therefore it puts a focus on that effective partnerships that can enable the creation of successful places. A quite different example that we can bring is, and very interesting, is the Architecturos Fondas from Lithuania, which is an open platform that provides a visibility space for bottom-up, voluntary-based initiatives and projects that would and brings them to the attention of the professional sector and the wider public that might not be aware of them through other means. And they use also lectures, public discussions, thematic tours, and exhibitions.
Moving to the fourth type, rating tools, which in fact is the first of the quality delivery tools. So we have seen the first three. Now it was the quality culture tools. Now we're moving to the quality delivery tools. Rating tools allows judgments to be made about the quality of design in a systematic and structured manner, usually by parties external to and therefore independent from the particular design process being evaluated. Different examples include formative evaluation tools, such as indicators or informal design review processes, which evaluate projects during the design development phase. And also summative evaluation tools, such as certification schemes or design competitions, which allow design proposals to be evaluated prior to their development.
The example that we are showing here is the Room for the River, which is a strategic plan for water management in the Netherlands, which also had the goal of enhancing the spatial quality of the area. And to this end, a quality team was established to coach the designers, to peer review the plans, and to regularly report to the ministry. This Q team was also given the assignment to produce recommendations as an independent entity on how to improve spatial quality. Complementary, you can also make mention the concept tendering case. This is a specific procedure used in several German cities for selling publicly owned lands. And it prioritizes the quality criteria of the projects instead of the highest bidding price. The price is often fixed in advance. And by so doing, the architectural, social, environmental qualities, or those that are recognized as essential by the city, become the key decision-making factors.
Moving to the fifth type, support tools are more directive within the design process itself, as they involve directly assisting or enabling design development teams with particular projects. They potentially encompass a range of financial means that can be used to encourage better design outcomes, providing financial support to key initiatives or delivery organizations, or raising, steering, and transferring of funding to better design. Examples may include indirect support tools, notably financial support to key delivery organizations, as arm's length agencies or architectural centers with a design remit, tied to the delivery of a defined quality cultural objectives. Also, direct support tools that include the provision of hands-on professional enabling, negotiation, or advice.
Across Europe, some states and municipalities have been appointing the role of state architects or city architects, explicitly tasked with providing urban design leadership, cross-stakeholder advocacy, and cultivating this whole ecosystem for good design, as it was defined this morning. And we've heard Warsaw City Architects team this morning explain how they are looking for solutions to support and foster the dialogue on urban design with citizens and the private sector and all the actors of the built environment, and how do they use and develop different tools. And it was interesting to hear that they feel dialogue itself is perhaps even more relevant than the actual results. With the reflow projects, another example that we can take, here the municipality of Milan in Italy has adopted a strategy for the revitalization of the municipal covered markets through new agreements and joint public-private governance and financial model. The aim is to renovate the buildings, making them once again spaces for social interaction as they used to be, but also for testing and implementing solutions for the circular management of food logistics between the urban area and the rural community. So also spaces for innovation and testing.
Moving to the sixth and last type of the 6 informal design governance tools, we have exploration tools that engage directly in the design process for mechanisms that investigate test out and involve the community in particular design approaches. They are hands-on but exploratory in nature, either utilizing temporary interventions or inputting into the large projects or place-shaping processes. Examples may include proactive engagement tools such as design-led community participation, or professional investigation tools such as research by design and testing and on-site experimentation.
We can also mention the marine terrain case in Amsterdam. This is an experimental district initiated since 2013 by the municipality jointly with the national government to research and test on-site solution to urban and social issues around predefined topics that were identified. Also, an incremental approach is put in place to allow to use the experimentations that prove successful to influence the long-term development of the area, and also to influence the urban policies for Amsterdam at large. But experimentation is conducted not only through the development of projects. And this morning we've heard about the continuous learning process, the processes that are taking place within public administrations around Europe, and specifically experimentations on the use of soft powers. In the medium-sized Italian city of Reggio Emilia, for example, the municipality has conducted an internal reorganization and developed new frameworks and legal frameworks and specific roles to support a more open and collaborative form of co-administration together with the community of urban actors and empowering the citizens' engagement. And this is the Neighborhood as Commons initiative.
To conclude, you can find all of these and much more on the Urban Maestro project website.
I mean, we'll now continue our program with inspirational roundtable that will be moderated by my colleagues, I mean, from the BMA, Simona Paplos-Kaite and Friedrich Serun. So Simona, please go ahead.
So we'll have an hour, less than an hour to talk now and discuss a little bit on the next steps or the future of the governance of urban design between ourselves, and then maybe even try to open up for audience questions. Let's see with the time, but perhaps after looking at the panorama of all these identified successful practices as presented in Urban Maestro's findings, for those who followed today's event, it should be quite, they should be quite overwhelmed as well with this kind of panorama of practices. But I wanted to even enlarge it slightly a bit more and perhaps ask Christophe and Roland to think or reflect on the tools or mechanisms or methodologies that were alternative and innovative that actually help to achieve quality design in the context where they're working. So Christophe, maybe you would like to.
Yeah, well, I mean, when we had this preparation discussion, I of course gave a few examples of that I had been involved in or that I knew very well. But I've been listening, of course, also to the conversations today. And then you, of course, also have a separate perspective. I mean, let me first say what I put on the table last time. Those were typically projects where there was let's say, a start from civil society, not actually from top down, but actually from bottom up. I had 3 projects. Perhaps I should just briefly explain them. One was in Antwerp, where a group of citizens actually stepped in when the city was selling a former police tower, and they wanted to buy the tower and actually make it available to the city, or make it available for a sort of more engaged, broader use. The second proposal the second example I was giving is here in Wuppertal, where also civil society, a group of people actually bullied the city administration into adopting, in fact, a development of a former railway track, and that's now become perhaps the most important public area in the city. And the third is a project which I'm personally involved in Bremen, in northern Germany, where also a small group of people actually bullied the local authority into taking a fairly active role in how to transform the inner city at this particular moment. That is, let's say, Corona, where a lot of shops are leaving and where it's really about sort of redefining what an inner city can be. Now, all three of these projects are, of course, relatively small scale. And also listening to today's discussions, I could, of course, see that, you know, the government's methods and the tools that you have really depends, A, on the scale, and B, also on the problem. Because, you know, it seems clear that if, for example, housing is involved, that your tools have to be really very different. I think the tools that I picked up today, and also which I encountered, are, of course, you know, all the tools that are about activating a certain sector of civil society. And I'll come back to that. Almost in the initiation phase. And I guess Andreas will also have to say something about that. You know, I was also running the Flanders Architecture Institute, so I did a you know, I know basically from inside what it means to sort of activate an architectural debate. Then of course that is very important, because it's often that kind of group who are sort of spearheading certain initiatives. The very interesting thing is, of course, how you sort of, you know, how that is being enlarged. You know, how the pioneers, who are usually also a very particular kind of person, yeah, who take a leadership in civil society, yeah. Yes, Utopia Stadt in Wuppertal, I was thinking, yes. Jonas has asked me. How that group becomes bigger, how, you know, it really becomes embedded in or absorbed by a larger population. And it's usually only if a larger population starts to support those causes that you can really sort of move on. And then, of course, the interesting thing is, and I'm not going to make it too long, the tools of, let's say, planning, the tools of governance, and the tools of communication, which kind of have to be, you know, rather well tuned towards each other, yeah, in order to make sure that you actually have a sort of larger common ground, which I think you also need as a public administration. And in the cases that I can think of, you know, the three I was talking about, there is an element of rather sophisticated communication, usually with experiences in what you might call counter public sphere, Gegenöffentlichkeit in German. So it's sort of, you know, alternative culture, which has sort of established well, in magazines, websites, but also
it's 16 hours.
Forms of, let's say, organizing public debates and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's nice. I think you've touched on some questions. Maybe Roland also can reflect on at in Viennese context, because he was as well working on larger urban developments in Vienna, and also trying to engage participation, or even trying to change these rules of the game while working and collaborating with public authorities as well. So maybe you can as well share a bit your experience on this kind of informal approaches to governing larger development projects in Vienna.
The case of Vienna, I think that there was a quite remarkable change or shift of governance in the last 10 years. And I think that it had to do with cooperative housing projects that emerged at that time, and that we saw that a lot of things were enabling through the cooperative housing and what people, when they engage with the community, what they can do for a city quarter, for a new quarter. And this has to do with the software also. So not only architectural quality, but also software in the sense of we have that people do something and engage, and that was the shift that we did in Vienna. That the code, the building code, was changed, and it was from it went from this regular zoning into a conditional zoning. So we have now the possibility to do contracts with the developers. So the city does a contract with the developers, and the developers have to fulfill some criteria to do, and some of the criteria might be, for example, the active ground floor zone or the local economic development that should happen in a quarter. And maybe 10 years ago, we were only thinking about quality in housing, but this is a shift now into quality of urban design and how to build a just city, I would say. So how to enable all these grassroots and all these entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs to do something. And that was that I think that we are right now, we are there, that we see the city as a whole, or that urban design has to be not only a physical intervention with an excellent quality in the architecture, but also have other criteria. And so we are doing that, I think, quite well now. We don't see it now really built ready because this is all on the way now. But we have some new areas in Vienna that have a lot of new innovation. For example, that this bigger land developers are not allowed now to sell their properties to the one who pays most of the price to get more square meter out of that. Now it's sometimes that we fix the price, and there is quality only on architecture and on the use, for example. And I think that's quite an innovative approach. And what comes together with this conditional zoning is also the quality control that we have for the bigger areas. We have a lot of committees that are with independent architects, and they say, well, you have to do this and this and that, and we not only control the architectural quality but also the urban design quality. And I think this is quite interesting.
Yeah, well, I think that we both of you mentioned this kind of power of the bottom-up initiatives, and that's definitely also one of the ways to experiment with new types of methods of making a change, or even transforming this relation to with public authorities or planning, or the way the decisions are taken. But we are also, like, now also in the European Union, where I have much more also tendency to share some ideas and share some principles of work. And there has been a lot of ambition on the political level too, to improve this, not only like building quality in itself, but also all the culture around architecture and urban planning at the European level. I mean, we've talked a little bit about it today when mentioning the new European Bauhaus initiative. There's also much to talk also about all the Baukultur movement that also crosses different regions. But maybe an interesting question here is what could be the ways of sharing this knowledge of good practices or good principles or methods, or how it is done in one place? How could this, as Christophe said, these pioneering initiatives could be upscaled also, or even transferred to different contexts? And maybe here I wanted to ask Hannah Harris, who's working also on city level and both on national level, on this kind of methods of sharing the knowledge of good examples, or what good design is. And maybe you could share a bit your insights on that in regards both to Finnish experience and also across maybe even your neighboring countries, etc. So, yeah.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm working as the Chief Design Officer in the city of Helsinki, and perhaps I'll say a couple of words about the role itself because it ties into this question of perhaps sort of cross-platform building and knowledge sharing. So in Helsinki, we're coming up to soon 10 years journey of a strategic investment in design and building a view that will help us work across platforms and across different city departments, building bridges on a kind of culture that really uses design to how we can look at, first of all, of course, the things that the city delivers, the services it delivers, and the users, importantly, who are at that other end, but importantly, in behind the scenes at how we as a city function and how we work across different departments as well, because I think this is crucial. I managed to catch the end of the previous session, one of the breakout rooms, which had to do with experimentation and how to make different pilot projects and experiments long-term. And I mean, the big thing behind there, of course, is yes, we need to from scratch work with different user groups, as Christoph was saying previously, but importantly, be ready to look at the structures behind. So in organizations such as cities or different public authorities, that how we share things between us and how we build those working methods with things that can be tricky and can go across departments. So for instance, looking at things like how we co-create in cities, that will require a lot of work like that. But then of course, secondly, these are topics that even just in the past week, I've been at several places where these topics are really important to cities across Europe and across the world at the moment. And this will mean that they're really the kind of discussion we are having here and the day with the Urban Maestro Day, but also beyond here, will require more efforts in enabling cross-platform, cross-city and international debates on how we can share best practices and how we, as for instance, city organizations, can work with larger ecosystems and the different stakeholders out there to enable such processes. Perhaps finally, in terms of the kind of design city networks that, for instance, we are involved in, these sort of debates are happening already, but the other thing, of course, is then on a national level. So we try and have we have certain discussions going on in Finland across different cities at the moment, and then how that taps back into various, let's say, national policies. For instance, the new architectural national policy that is just being set at the moment in Finland, and so forth, so that we find mechanisms of both national goals and how we at the local level can then be active partners and involve things like that.
Yeah, maybe I wanted to, sorry, I interrupted a little bit, but I was also eager to zoom out a little bit and maybe ask Ana Ramos to share her insights on this kind of knowledge or culture overspanning across different European contexts, because Fundació Mies van der Rohe was initiated the EU MIAS award that celebrates this kind of higher quality architecture and urban design, and also consequently they have also showed much more importance to topics above only building quality. So more addressing more societal issues, economical issues, and addressing the questions of today when evaluating this architectural contemporary architecture project. So maybe Anna, you have some insights on sharing knowledge between different contexts.
Yeah, hi Simona, hi everyone, and thank you for having us. As it has been a pleasure to listen to some of the breakout rooms before. So we do organize these European Union Prize for Contemporary Architecture, Mies van der Rohe Award, since 1988, and And it's an award which goes every 2 years to the best architecture work in Europe, understanding Europe as a bunch of 41 countries in the last edition. And I would like to highlight, for instance, the last two winners. The current winner of the UMIS Award 19 was the Bordeaux project by Lacaton and Vassal, and Philippe Drouot and Christophe Houtin. By the way, I have to say that today we are witnessing what happens with prizes and awards. They are an extraordinary mean to disseminate outside architecture sphere the important and the key points of a good work of architecture. So I'm saying this for the Pritzker Prize they got today, but the very interesting thing is that they are doing for the dissemination something which is also what we do. When a building gets an award, it's the moment not to talk about the formal quality of that work of architecture, but about the reasons behind that quality and why the jury deemed that this piece of art and technique deserves to be looked at. And it's the moment to give voice to not only the architects, but all the stakeholders that have been involved for 10 years, 20 years in that architecture process, because we all know architecture starts very early. Architecture and urban design starts very early, and then continues for very long. So many people is involved in the whole process. It is very important that we all share with general audience the added value of good design and why are their lives to be better if they happen in a more quality environment. So that's clearly our main task, to try to have everyone involved in the conversation. It's not about beauty contests, but it's about conversations amongst economists, sociologists, urbanists, architects, neighbors, politicians. We all have to remember, and if there are some in the room, they are welcome to listen to these politicians. They don't need to be experts in urban design or in architecture. So sometimes they might also obviously need to listen to experts and technicians. And one more thing we do through the award is to disseminate the role of the architects as mediators, because bottom-up projects are important, but at any stage of the process, it works much better if there is a designer, an architect, an urbanist involved in the process. The Lacaton and Vassal, and especially Philippe Drouot was the one that, was the architect working hard on this idea of architecture plus, and all together they created this Never Demolish, and that ended up in the ears of a strong power in Bordeaux who decided to support that idea in that process. And the UMIS Award project in 2017, which was this Bijmelwerk in Amsterdam, in Kleiburg, this big block that was not demolished, that was coming from civil society, but architects also were involved since the very beginning, and they, working together with economists, made it possible to do not demolish that building, but give it a second life. So I want to hail here also the role of architects and designers, either on the side of the bottom-up projects, working with society, either on the side of strong powers, which are always needed also to have them involved. So that's the added value of architecture, I think, and architects.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think you would like to continue. I think in trying to innovate the way we design cities, long-term strategical planning is needed and choices need to be made. Often we see that there's a lot of attention for priority zones, and less important areas, peri-urban sites, maybe rural sites are not yet covered. And a question we have is like how to generate a quality culture in every context, not just like flagship developments and so on. And maybe I would like to invite now Marion Valère to explain a bit the process she's trying to set up in Paris, and maybe after that Lucas Hauser from Prague, excuse me, to explain a bit how they are trying to roll out a bit a vision that goes beyond this kind of bling bling developments, and that are trying to spread out and also reach out to the more ordinary living environment of its citizens. Marion?
Yeah, I'm so happy that Anna talked about Lacaton and Vassal, because obviously they are French architects, and so we are very proud that they received the Pritzker Prize. But I think it's really a perfect example to talk about design, because I mean they are really the perfect architects to show that you don't have to start by design, but like design is the end of a process where you involve people and where you make the good ecological choices, and then you have the good design at the end. And for me, a good design is something that looks like evident, and you're like, okay, it has to look like that. And I have participated to several architecture competitions where Lacaton and Vassal were actually candidates, and the developers were often not so motivated to hire them, because it was a less bling bling, as you said, design compared to other architects. And we were fighting for them because we said it will be the best project at the end. And so what we are trying to do now in Paris is really to change the rules of the game in terms of how we interact with the private sector first, and with citizens, of course, second. It's always very hard to talk about design in Paris, because since we have a very homogeneous city, and because of Haussmann, etc., every time we try a new design, it's controversial. So yeah, it's a very complicated topic. And so I really believe that the first thing is that if we want a better design, we have to change the rules of the game of how we do as a city, as an administration. And that's why we changed now a few, like 6 years ago, I think, we launched Reinventing Paris, a competition where the idea was that we would not sell anymore to the highest bidder when we have a public land. And that's very important, because when we sell land to the developers, if we are based only on price, then the projects are not good. And so we said now it will be the best project that will win, and not the highest price. So that's the first very important rule. I think that many cities can change. And then it's also changing scale. Now we are working a lot on the 15-minute city, and we realized that we had like municipal policies that we tried to implement at the scale of the city, but that sometimes, like in big European cities, sometimes you lose the scale of the neighborhood, and like you don't know your neighbors. And some very simple things, we have lost them sometimes in European or Occidental cities. Like you cannot go to just play in the streets because you don't trust the space, etc. And so we are really trying to look for every Parisian people, like 15 minutes from home. Like, do you feel safe to go to the street and to let your children play? And that's very basic, but sometimes, you know, in urban planning, I think we forget basic stuff, and so it's all about like having a bakery close to your home, and having a street without cars where you can play. And so we really try to focus on that. And finally, it's about how we change public space, because we really want to transform. Not only to have like big projects in Paris, like the Champs-Élysées, we will do those big projects and it's great, but we want to change for every Parisian people what the Parisian street looks like, because we will transform half of the parking spaces in Paris. So it means that every street in Paris can change, because when you take all those spaces that are now taken by cars, if you transform half of those spaces, it can really become like playgrounds, green spaces. That actually we cannot do it only through the administration, because we don't have enough money and enough people. So the way we are forced, and it's a good thing, to local organization with people, and also so that they can really take power and also be involved in their own street, and that's what we are trying to do.
Thank you very much. But I would like to give the opportunity to Lucas Hauser from Prague to maybe complement on that and explain a bit how in his city and in his administration they are trying to have this kind of oil effect. Lucas?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. So I have to admit that I'm quite happy to say that IPR is working on a daily basis on improving the general appearance of the city of Prague. We already have a very beautiful city. If you've been to Prague, I guess that you know. But we have also different parts that need to be refurbished and need to be enhanced. And IPR is working on it on all the levels that are available to it. We're talking with locals thanks to Camp, which is a showroom, kind of a showroom, which was very much inspired by the Pavillon de l'Arsenal in Paris. And I believe that we kind of managed to surpass this Parisian pavilion. So that's a place for the public to come and see what's happening around them, and to ask for good design to be involved in their everyday life. IPR also talks with investors a lot. We have a whole office that's put together people that have different parts of the city in charge, and every investor that wants to build something within the city has to ask and consult their project with these specialists who also can invite different experts from different fields that are regrouped within IPR, and that can comment on the project that is being that asks for a building permit. So that is also a very, very good way. And what we are working.
And what about the funding, maybe?
Sorry.
What about the funding, maybe? Is this also something that is taken into account in your approach?
Well, that's something that the municipality is actually working on, the idea of land value capture and contributions of different investors. And of course, this is a big part of the discussions with the investors. And that's something that's starting yet in Prague, but we already are putting in some methodology how the investors will be able to contribute, and how the city will be able to get funding from these. And what I wanted to mention, because that's the main purpose of our office, is actually focusing on different parts of the public sector, which I believe should be the example within urban government and urban design. And so we're trying to actually design the processes for these different parts of the public sector on how to approach investment and how to approach urban governments. So we're working very much on client briefs, but client briefs that can be applied on a general level, on a general scale throughout the whole city. And we're educating very much about competitions and helping everyone who wants to come to look to find a design through a public competition.
Thank you very much. Now I maybe would like to address Andreas Rubin, because throughout the Urban Maestro project, we obviously have been looking a lot to Switzerland, not only because of the Davos Declaration, but also because of the work that has been done in various cities. I think we realized that it's so important to ensure some kind of long-term stewardship in advocating for quality culture, and we believe that is the case in Switzerland. I don't know what lessons can we export from that, and what should be done in other European contexts in order to have a similar kind of quality culture. I don't know, Andreas, if you could a bit elaborate on this.
Okay. The lesson to be drawn from Switzerland, I think, is something that some people like Marion have said already, that it is necessary to basically take urban ground out of speculation and make it a perfect breeding ground for experimentation in the production of the new city. And interestingly enough, you can say that almost all projects in Switzerland that have managed to give impulses to how we can produce a new and more collective and inclusive city were developed not with a profit goal. And that's very important. And it has also to do with the fact that there is a kind of social contract in Swiss urban development between the public hand on the one side that has ownership over land, and on the other side, a representation of society which is organized in cooperatives. Housing cooperatives are very important in Switzerland since the 1850s, and they are very powerful as urban developers in the sense that they develop new typologies. One we're seeing here, Kalkbreite. This is one of the most interesting, typologically most interesting urban projects because it's mixed use. It's on a piece of urban land that is still used in its original function, which is a tram depot. The tram depot still works there, but it was only there before and nothing on top. So there was a deal was struck between the cooperative who said we would like to use the airspace of the tram depot, everything above 9 meters. So that, or like 7 meters, so that the tram depot can still properly function, but we want to build on top and around. They did this, and the city didn't sell the ground to the cooperative, but they sold them, entre guillemets, the right to build. Baurecht, you say in German. And I think this is maybe the first lesson to draw on. Don't sell land as a public entity, lease it. For a limited period of time, so that you have control programmatically what happens over it, and that you can also change it if need be. And on this premise, basically, this lease contract is given on a fifth of the value of the land, a fifth, which in a city like Zurich makes a whole lot of sense because it's the ground is terribly expensive. With this kind of reduction, it is possible for this cooperative to actually buy this lease and develop their project for a legal period of 99 years. And then, so this was the depot before. That's it now. So there are these trams still running, and on top you have this courtyard. This is plus 9 meters. And you have the perimeter building around it, and with insanely interesting apartment typologies, mostly not anymore for the classical family, but cluster apartments for all kinds of combinations of people. This space is public, even though it's a courtyard of a housing project. And interestingly enough, it's not only a housing project. Housing is what you see in blue in this kind of extrapolated section. And the red stuff is basically all kinds of programs, commercial programs. It's offices, cafes, restaurants, a public cinema, a packaging-free supermarket, and stuff like this. So basically 40% of the volume of this so-called housing project isn't housing. That's another lesson to be drawn. We should no longer build monofunctional residential projects, nor any other kind of monofunctional projects. We need to mix the city so that we have a large concentration of difference on a small footprint. And in this way, we reduce the unnecessary mobility, we create connectivity, and we create, these are some of these programs in this place. And we create also basically a porosity between private and public users. It was very important, for instance, in this case, that there's not a gate but that the city extends from the street space up the staircase into the courtyard. And that's some of the inside. And it also shows that these projects can have a very high standard in architectural terms. This is actually, this was done by competition. In Switzerland, you always do an architectural competition. And these are all the apartment typologies. So actually, I don't know any kind of project that was developed on the free real estate, on the liberal free market of real estate development that has this type of variation and programmatic intelligence. So in that sense, it's very clear. I think take out private capital interest out of urban development, indicate sites for experimental projects, empower collectivities that represent a collective agenda, but which are empowered to act economically. And a cooperative is that. And also a cooperative, by definition, in Switzerland at least, is not allowed to make profit. And if you combine these different things, you will see that we will move beyond the type of city that we all know that actually doesn't work, which is basically the sectorial city of modernism, which in some ways still lives, at least in the brains of urban planning administration departments in some way. Maybe not in Vienna. I think they're doing cool stuff. But we need to get beyond a city that is basically ghettoized by different interests, and we need to find a way how sort of an amalgamation of the collectivity of interests that produce our society can actually steer the development of the city as a whole. But in order to do that, you need to operate through smaller examples. And maybe just to finish, with my partner Ilka Ruby and an architectural office from Switzerland, EM2N, we did an exhibition on it's called Together, on the future of collective housing. And actually they did, EM2N did a very beautiful kind of fictitious neighborhood plan, which actually shows buildings that are real. These are actually 22 projects from all over the world that try to develop collective housing typologies. But all of them have the quality that the ground floor is not used for living, but for collective purposes. I think that's really, really interesting. And so EM2N actually placed these 22 projects together on a fictitious urban neighborhood and created an urbanism that would relate all these buildings. And it was amazing to see the effect that you have when the entire ground plane, both on the street space as in the ground level of each building, is actually not privately colonized by private interests, but is always open for public usage. And this would create a city that we can really collectively inhabit, and where we have a ground plane of community and of communal interests. And then if you stack up in the section, you can have different types of individual interests, from housing to offices to whatever use you want. Yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to.
That comes in. Thanks, Andreas. I think you could or you should even write a manifesto on this. You know, this sounds extremely relevant, also in line to Venice Biennale's work and topic on how can we live together or how can we coexist together on this kind of new type of condition of co-creating or taking decisions together. And I think that the lessons you've drawn are very, very valuable. Maybe for the last 5 minutes that we have, I would like to invite other experts as well to contribute to a bit to what Andreas started with his presentation. Maybe reflect a bit on the lessons for the future, and reflecting a bit on what steps should be taken, and maybe who should lead this kind of change or transformation. Would you have any ideas? Christoph? and then everyone else, just like a minute or two. I would like to hear your reflections on that, on this kind of on the next step. Christoph, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to have this, let's say, this arch from my talking about relatively small and sort of bottom-up projects to now the last project that Andreas was talking about. And of course, they both have something in common, and that is the cooperative is essentially, of course, something that comes out of civil society, if only historically. And I guess there's an interesting thing there which is the tension between, let's say, those people who take initiatives and the sort of wider public. I think that's something that we have to address all the time, because, you know, in fact, the Baugruppe or the type of Baugruppe that you have in Zurich in that particular part of town probably has has the form of the function of a catalyst. But there's also, of course, always the question, what are the other processes which are connected with that? And because this may also be just the first step towards gentrification, say, yeah, which is not necessarily negative or not necessarily problematic. But I think it's the tension is something we need to address, or we need to understand a little more about, because we also see that you know, projects need, let's say, certain groups that actually take the initiative. But at the same time, we also have to have a sort of critical test, which is happening all the time while it's being implemented, as to what the wider social implications are. And I think that is probably true for even a project like let's say, a public route like the one I was talking about in Wuppertal, but it's also true for this big thing. And the question is, how do you actually sort of introduce this sort of critical court of appeal in your own procedures?
That's good.
You understand what I mean? Yeah. I mean, you know,
or who's there to keep an eye that this kind of processes happen? You know, perhaps not necessarily who's there to necessarily like organize it or set it up. Maybe Hannah Harris.
Yeah, but sorry, let me say one thing. I mean, the interesting thing is, of course, a lot of the people who actually take those initiatives would be open to being questioned, or would be open to questioning themselves. Huh? I mean, if I think of the Contrat de Quartier in Brussels, you can also see there's a lot of, let's say, reflection happening through the very same people who actually start the initiative. So in a way, I don't think it's necessarily impossible.
No, but not at all. But there's a mechanism behind it.
Yeah, do you actually create instruments for that, or does it happen naturally? Or, you know, I think that's the real challenge.
Maybe, yeah, I see Roland wants to contribute.
I think it's about unlocking potentials of people that are in the public realm. So it could be a Baugruppe, but I mean, Baugruppe is very specific, and we fight for a lot more Baugruppe, but the mass housing is not a Baugruppe. A Baugruppe is always very small. But I think it's about unlocking the potentials of people. And we are doing a GPI Urban Europe project called Place City. And it's not about a housing project, but it's a public realm. It's about the public space. And we try to bring people on the street with their own ideas. But who is the enabler? Who is facilitating this process? And I mean, if I would have a problem if the private sector is facilitating itself, because there is always interest behind it. So what we need is a creative bureaucracy. I think that we need some nice bureaucrats that can say, hey, this is cool. I can engage myself in the city, and actually, that is very difficult, because I mean, we have to have the cool people on the public sector and not only the private sector, and that's why we need this kind of engagement, like this Urban Maestro, that is able to unlock, facilitate through the public.
Maybe Hannah, shortly too.
Yeah, okay, so public sector speaking here now. So I think this question of unlocking potential is really crucial, and that unlocking has to happen both in us in the public sector and the authority side, and then the of course the different citizens and people. There's been different examples here about where do those initiatives come from. It might be from certain kinds of groups initially all the time. And at the same time, we know, I mean, in Helsinki, for instance, we have a system which is called Stadiluotsi. It's like a neighborhood navigator, if you wish it. They are these people who are working with different communities and helping facilitating initiatives that are coming through, so that there is actually an understanding of, you know, this plot here, or this square here, this public space here, this building here, we would like to do something. What are those mechanisms, and how do we increase the capacity and understanding of what the potential is and the possibilities. And then, of course, there are things like, I mean, various cities have systems of participatory budgeting and things. For instance, here in Helsinki, we're in the second round now of a newish system, and majority of the projects in there have to do with somehow improving the urban realm. So doing something with public spaces or the urban environment in general. This potential is huge, and it's important there. And that is one of those places where I think we really need to work together to unlock those potentials and see where that dialogue goes. The other place, which was discussed in one of the breakouts earlier today, of course, is how we work across, for instance, as cities. The major place where we can develop those potentials is in schools. So Jaana Räsänen from Children's Architecture School earlier was speaking in one of the breakout rooms, and this is something as a city in Helsinki we really want to develop this aspect further, how we will work together with our children at how they are reading their environments, being part of them, working together to find solutions and develop a caring and respect for those environments through that, and then potentially a will to be part of doing stuff in there in the future. So yes, so there are things to be done in the neighborhood level, and at the same time, like Marian was saying, we need the good examples and the communicated large projects to go alongside that. Those act as inspirations for the neighborhood level as well, as has been here in Helsinki with the case of our new central library. So that big project has given aspiration for unlocking potential in the neighborhood level.
I would only like to remind that very few countries have laws protecting architecture and urban design as of public interest and as public goods. And those are tools that bureaucrats might need to become creative, because bureaucrats need a good, clear legislation, and then they can be free. Yeah, only that was the only.
Thank you very much. That was really nice. So I understand it is frustrating to close the discussion here. The good news is that we are not closing, because we are going to a virtual drink, and there will be an opportunity to continue that discussion. I just would like to thank you everyone for the enthusiastic participation. That was a very long, inspirational, good journey. I mean, it was intellectually stimulating, and we also hope to continue that kind of work. This is, of course, provided that we succeed convincing member states or other partners to continue supporting that work. But I think the event today really demonstrates that this is very much needed. There is an appetite for discussing the question of urban and architectural design in European countries and cities. There is also something in common. It requires probably an initiative at the European level. And the good news is that as we have heard this morning, I mean, there are already, I mean, some initiative going on in parallel of the work that we have conducted in this project, and we very much look forward to this. I'd like to very, very quickly thank all the members of the team that have supported this, because I mean, some are actually visible and talking, but there are also many others who have contributed to this. So I'm referring to the work of Emilia, Terpsi, Yannicka, Xavier, Colm, Simona, Frederick, Cecilia, João, Tommaso, Christian, Matthew, and some others that I have no time really to mention, but I mean, really want to be really thankful to all of them. So cheers to everyone.